Welcome back, boys and girls. Costin here with my campaign as Nakari in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires before the Tides of Torment comes out with the Slaanesh rework. I had dealt with Eltharion, vassalized him, vassalized Crix, vassalized Katik, vassalized Grom. I was also in a pretty good position to be able to vassalize Be'lakor. But the problem still remained. I had to deal with Tyrion and Alarielle. Alarielle had not gone after the Scourge of Cain. She had not even taken the Phoenix Gate. I suspect the reason behind this was the fact that she had gone to war with Safari, taken the White Tower of Hoth, taken 2 regions in that province. Tyrion had taken 1. And then she had gotten stuck in a war with Noctilus. Alarielle and Tyrion were winning that war, and what that meant for me is that I had an opportunity to vassalize Alarielle without having to fight her. There are various ways to do so. As Slaanesh, one of the ways you can do so is through selective influence. But I figured if I took the Scourge of Cain territory, I would have something that was so valuable to her that she would agree to vassalization. It was pretty close on that subject, but you gotta understand the way the AI works. The way the AI works is that if you're stronger than they are, they're not going to be so eager to declare war on you. And one of the things that counts for that is actually having vassals, because then their faction strength is added to yours. Since I had 2 legendary lords as vassals and 2 minor factions as vassals, that was a good amount of faction strength. So it meant Alarielle and Tyrion were unlikely to declare war on me. Not impossible, in fact she did end up declaring war on me, though she kind of didn't declare war on me directly. She joined a war that I believe Eltharion was in. I had declared war on Eltharion and Tyrion, and I think she joined one of those wars. I'm not entirely certain which one it was. Regardless, however, I was in a position where I could take the entirety of Naggareth, deal with the Dark Elves over there, which meant a minor settlement battle over here at the Shrine of Cain, and then I was able to actually out-resolve the provincial capital and take it over, which was a tier 3 settlement. So I was able to get the port, I was able to get the barracks over there, and while Alarielle was now willing to vassalize directly for that, if I waited long enough for her to take the provincial capital of Tyrion, which had fallen under Noctilus's control, I could potentially sell every other territory except the provincial capital, and that might be enough to vassalize her. At least that was my thinking on the subject. Meanwhile, I also decided to do Nakari's quest battle. It was one of the most brutal quest battles in the entire game, because you're dealing with a bunch of high-end elven units in that specific quest battle, which makes it pretty difficult to deal with. I did manage to pull through. I did lose some units, including my chariots, but at this point I was dealing with so many minor settlement battles and dealing with so many sieges that I figured I didn't really care. Also, I lost an Alurus that I had just recruited, but again, not too big of a problem at that particular point. The moment Alarielle ended up at war with me, I sold her some of the minor settlements, including the Shrine of Cain, to her, and I was able to get the peace agreement. I was just buying time, hoping that I'd avoid having to fight a war with Alarielle, who by this point was controlling something like a quarter of Ulthuan. In the meantime, after taking the Phoenix Gate, which I also did, I decided to go pay a visit to Be'lakor. I had a cult in Be'lakor's territory, so I could see what he was up to. I could specifically see if he had an army in his Dark Fortress. When he moved the army out of there, I teleported Nakari over to Albion, and I was able to get a quick vassalization with Be'lakor. Now, interesting point on the subject of vassalization through subjugation. When you subjugate a faction, you're not actually reducing the tier of the settlement that you're taking over. Because you're not taking over the settlement, you're not sacking it, you're subjugating the faction. So that makes it so that the faction you're vassalizing is actually more useful. And I did this with Be'lakor, and I would do so again with Tyrion. But with Alarielle vassalized through Tor Anilek, I turned my sights on Tyrion. Fun fact, I set up a cult in the Shrine of Cain once Alarielle took it over. I also had a cult in Safri, because that's one of the cults or the cult that Nakari starts with. I had set that up to diplomatic relations, hoping to improve my relationship with Alarielle, so I could more easily vassalize her. Set up a new one in Shrine of Cain, so I could keep the momentum going with diplomatic relations, and then teleport to Nakari and got the second army, as well to the White Tower of Hoeth, where I lay in wait for Tyrion to advance. Or lay in wait until Tyrion would actually see my second army as it was arriving and decide to attack that. I was kind of hoping he would attack the White Tower of Hoeth. That would have made it easier, but I figured I had a pretty good chance of ambushing him, or even if I didn't ambush him, he would still engage that second army, ignore Nakari who lay in ambush, go for either the White Tower of Hoeth, or go for my second army, and that's actually what ended up happening. So Tyrion came at me with 2 armies, not 2 full armies, 1 stack and a couple of other units. Under a relatively low-level lord, his armies were all over the place. So he sent the B team to fight against me. I was able to defeat this force fairly easily, like just set up my cast warriors, which I had recruited by this point, and wait for Nakari to show up with the Exalted Demonettes. Pretty annoying factor about the Exalted Demonettes. Exalted Demonettes are very strong units in terms of their damage dealing potential, but obviously they don't have the durability of cast warriors, and when they rout, they just disintegrate. So that's one of the things you gotta be concerned about. But they take 2 turns to recruit, which is not an ideal situation to be dealing with, because you do want that variety of Chaos Warriors and Exalted Demonettes. Or you could just recruit a bunch of Chaos Warriors and like Nakari and fast-moving units to do the job. In this case, I did decide to get a bunch of Exalted Demonettes. It was going to screw me over in terms of auto-resolve, because Exalted Demonettes are nowhere near as good than auto-resolve as Chaos Warriors. But I figured, you know what, let's just go for it. Let's play that specific game. I ended up completely destroying 2 of Tyrion's armies. And then after that, Eltharion decided to show up and ruin my day, in a way. He put some pressure on Tyrion, but he ended up getting wiped out. So he decided, well, Grom got wiped out trying to fight me, so I'm just going to study from Grom. Alistair tried to attack my secondary army. He got ambushed, easily defeated, no problem whatsoever. That just left me to deal with Tyrion. It was at this point on my economy was in a really good state, as well as the fact that I had finally sorted out my items with Nakari. So Nakari was much stronger, and having done the quest battle, I had Nakari's sword, I had the weapon, I had the pretty good armor, so I was really able to be far more aggressive in Nakari than I had been previously. Also, while one of my Alurises had been killed in the quest battle, I still had another which I was ranking up. And Aluris are pretty good in terms of giving your army a decent level of survivability in battle with one of their skills. And that was something that was going to be pretty important in terms of dealing with Tyrion. I also summoned a cult army to deal with Tyrion, but I ended up having to fight Tyrion in the Shrine of Asuryan itself, which is almost as bad as having to fight Tyrion in Lothern, really, because there's a fairly substantial garrison over there in the Shrine of Asuryan that Tyrion had built up. Now, by this point with my armies, I had recruited some allied units, some archers from Eltharion, regular archers, not archers with light armor, which would have been better. I also had the cult army besieging one of Tyrion's minor settlements. I wanted that cult army to be able to take that settlement, so I didn't bring it to the battle at the Shrine of Asuryan. And instead, what I just did is stack up all of my melee units, all my melee infantry units, so my Chaos Warriors, my Demonettes, Regiments Renown, Phoenix Guard that I had seduced before the battle, and I just went all in. The blob is forever, the melee blob of Slaanesh. The reason the blob is so good is because it helps protect individual units and heroes, spraying the damage that they're taking all around. Even when you're getting hit by spells or phoenixes, you're just not going to take as much damage on individual units. And that's pretty key for the sake of balance of power. So even though I was getting hit on both sides over here by Tyrion, I was in a pretty good position. I had the greenskin bolt throwers come in and the archers come in. Their job was to destroy any tower that was going to be a potential threat to me. And so with the blob, the massive blob of melee units coming in, flanking units also going in, trying to do as much damage as I could, using my Aluris with her ability to buff up the damage resistance of my units, I was just able to do a lot of damage to Tyrion's units. Of course, I still had to deal with Tyrion, and Tyrion is really tricky to kill a lot of the time in many battles because he's just got a huge amount of healing, he's got a huge amount of durability, he has also AoE. So Tyrion is the kind of guy who can be thrown in the middle of an enemy army and can survive it. Now, between Nakari's Rampage and other abilities, I was in a pretty good position before he showed up. And when he did show up, I just unleashed everything that I had against him. So what I did is Nakari has an ability that allows him to reduce the melee defense of a unit. Also, there's a spell in the lore of Slaanesh that also reduces melee defense. So between reducing melee defense, I think I was just able to kill Tyrion, or maybe some bug happened. I'm not quite sure, really. Because one moment, Tyrion was just fine. Another moment, he was just kind of dead. So I really don't know precisely what ended up happening here. Either some pathfinding bug, or just Nakari being freaking Nakari. Like, Tyrion just kind of ended up dead. I have no idea how that happened exactly. I may imagine it's a pathfinding bug, but I have really no freaking clue exactly what happened there. If anyone has an explanation, please let me know, because it just kind of was like, okay, that happened. That was just weird. Regardless, I probably would have won the battle even if Tyrion had stayed alive, but I would have just taken more casualties. And my concern here was also not just in beating Tyrion, but yeah, taking out Lothar and having enough forces to be able to do so. Due to the strength of the Lothran garrison. Ideally, I wanted to take Lothran as the last settlement from Tyrion, so that the level of Lothran would not be reduced, and so I could just trade everything else back to him, except the Shrine of Asuryan, which I would keep for myself. But he had Volzanvol, took that over. I also was sending a cultist over here to Morathi. In one of those cult magi, called Magus, I wanted to get the special structures in Morathi settlements. That way I could possibly vassalize Morathi through just seductive influence. But yeah, by this point, all of Ulthuan was mine. Just Eltharion to deal with. Noctilus declared war, I imagine, just in desperation. Or maybe just the behavior of the AI, where the AI is looking always in a campaign to capture certain specific settlements. I think that's the reason Alarielle was so willing to vassalize, because I had Torinlek, and I think her AI scripted to always want Torinlek, so she highly values that if you trade it to her. Can be pretty useful if you're looking to make an alliance with Alarielle. In other campaigns over here, I just wanted to vassalize her, because an alliance was not going to work because of aversion. A vassalization agreement would. And so at this point, I was already pushing tier 4 settlements. I also kept Eltharion for myself. I'm looking to use that to increase my hero capacity, because really, I only have one province in this campaign. Everything else is held in trust by my vassals. Imagine if any of them breaks a vassal agreement. Things would get ugly very, very quickly. Next up, I think I'm going to go after Bretonnia and or maybe the Sisters of Twilight. Maybe that will help me get that vassal agreement with Morathi one way or another. Or just wait 10 more turns until I get another cult. I have a cult under one of Eltharion's settlements, so I can use that to just continuously produce cult magi, because your vassal is not going to destroy your cult. Even if they detect it, I think they're not going to destroy it. Not entirely certain on that. I do keep the discoverability below 100%, so whether or not Eltharion would remove the cult, assuming he discovered it, that's the big question mark over here. But still, Ulthuan was mine, and now it was time to have an easy mode for the rest of the campaign. I was also starting to really get a good amount of allied recruitment. The reason I chose bolt throwers, by the way, is while catapults may do more damage, they're not quite as accurate. And so goblin bolt throwers are useful in one respect. They're good at taking down towers. It's kind of hilarious, like the worst dwarf artillery unit is really useful for the greenskins. Anyway, that is all for now. Ulthuan is mine, Be'lakor is mine, Grom is mine. Time to deal with Bretonnia.